successfully. SG-5 and the SG-8 have already arrived safely.
We do appreciate what you're doing.
Despite appearances, our participation in this effort is not one of good faith, Dr. Jackson. The Russian military is not here to do your bidding.
I wasn't suggesting you were.
Your government seems to think it can dictate protocol in all matters regarding Stargate technology.
I've been working on this for weeks. I'm going to do this goddamn scene. And he goes, nope, we're going to cut it. And I said, no, I'm doing this scene. He said, okay, you can do it, but we're only taking the last 2 lines. And I worked my ass off on that to get it just perfect. But anyway, it would turn out to be a good deal. You know, I lasted out for several years and did a bunch of shows and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I suppose, Gary, you mentioned that sort of learning Russian, and in terms of just the dialogue of obviously you're rehearsing with your tutor in terms of one-on-one, but then coming on then and repeating those lines live in terms of shooting in terms of Russian. Was that sort of a different sort of eerie experience? Would you feel uncomfortable in your own sort of skin having to do that, obviously, or were you so at ease with your lines and your scripts? Obviously, as an actor, it comes a second nature.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm pretty at ease when it comes to dialogue. Nothing phases me when I go onto set, and what I found was when I spoke my lines with a Russian accent, when I spoke, my English lines with a Russian accent, I was having the same problem that Russians have saying certain words.
Okay.
Getting them out so that they sound like perfect Russian, but sometimes you cannot speak certain words because they will not come out. And it was embarrassing at a point. But in Russian, I had, you could just rip it off. But trying to say it now I feel like a guy speaking English as a second language. It was quite funny. But so I toned down my Russian accent a little bit just so I could get the English out. But I found it's pretty easy, pretty fun.
And I suppose, Gary, in terms of, you mentioned you joined after 4 seasons, and I suppose Stargate really, SG-1 really took off after the 2nd season in terms of the boom sort of factor. So you probably were aware that you were coming to a big sort of production at the time, and obviously looking on from the outside, you probably watched 1 or 2 episodes before you actually came in, and I imagine before you tried out for your role. And were you sort of taken back when you arrived on set in terms of the scale and the mass grandeur of the project?
One thing that I found that when I went in for Stargate was that it was a well-oiled machine. The crew was amazing. Everybody knew their stuff. You go in and it was all very organized and fabulous. And I was just, I'd say not intimidated because I already had a lot of shows under my belt at that time. I wasn't intimidated by it, but I was certainly in awe of how professional and how put together the show was. And they got la creme de la creme as far as the crew goes. So yeah, I guess I was going, I'm in. I'm on a show. I'm on a great show. Yay.
Yeah, and I suppose, Gary, in terms of that, you were sort of the anti good guy in terms of that. In terms of the SG-1, did you just sort of notice after coming in there after the 4th season, just seeing Michael Shanks, Richard Dean Anderson, Amanda Tapping, Christopher Judge working together, that they were so in sync with each other that they almost sort of knew what the next person was going to say next sort of scenario?
Oh yeah, no, because their chemistry, as I said, their chemistry was so great. And it's like you feel like an interloper. You go and you feel like an outsider, which was perfect for my character because my character was an outsider, and he was a bit of a villain. But we had with General Hammond and the Colonel, we had a mutual grudging respect, and it made for a nice chemistry for us as well because you know, a part of me is going, yeah, you Americans, you know, you always get the gravy. And now what do I get? I get a piece of bread. You know, it's like, you know, it's like that. But, and I feel like that grudging rivalry, but respect carried over in the show. And that's why people sort of glommed onto the character and liked the character so much. Is because of that. Is because, you know, if you want to make things work, you got to work together. Yeah.
And I suppose, Gary, I spoke to Cliff Simon, who played the gold ball in the sort of show, and he told me that he had no such thing as a 6 or 7 deal in terms of episode. Every episode he went in, he said he worked his ass off because he didn't know if he was going to be coming back again. There was actually no guarantees as such. There was no written paper saying that you're going to be appearing over 2 or 3 seasons with 4, 6 or 7 episodes. Was this a sort of similar story for you? Did you know that
exactly
you were coming back?
same. You never know when you're going to come in. They would say you're going to be doing this episode and this episode for sure. We don't know what's going on after that, but that was the beauty of it, is they weren't writing like, you know, 10, 15 shows ahead. They kept changing them, and it was like that. It was what you call a show to contract. You know,
and I suppose, Gary, in terms of that, you mentioned the sort of 2 shows in succession. When you completed those, would have been a sense of contentment if that was it? If you weren't sort of called back, did you come out of those 2 shows thinking to yourself, well, that might be it. There mightn't be a chance. That might be my time in Stargate SG1. And if that was the case, or there was always a sense of a feeling that there was something further in the pipeline for your character?
Oh, I had no doubt there was going to be something pipeline, because the way the storylines are written, you know, they don't just go, yes, we're going to set up this great story and then we're going to kill you. No, we knew that you know, you're going to be coming back for more. So that was always nice to know. I mean, I had the same thing on another series I did called Cedar Cove, where you never knew if you were going, and you know that you were going to be doing this episode and this episode for sure, but nothing was locked down. So they put you on what they call a show to show. And yeah, I was in there for a couple of years. So it's just, that's just the way it works, you know. And unless you get a signed 3-year contract or 2-year contract, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, they could kill you off in a second just by, you know, having an alien blow you up. But that never happened until the last episode.
Yeah, I saw something there, a recent sort of interview where you actually spoke about the aliens, the sort of Asgard, and actually seeing them in sort of the flesh, this sort of costumes that they were sort of wearing, and you said you were sort of taken back how sort of real they sort of looked.
I know. And yeah, when I was sitting there with that's the iridescent guy, right?
Yeah.
The iridescent. Well, because I felt him, and he felt like, you know, just like he was real, you know. And when he talked, his mouth and his eyes and everything, and I was like, shit, I'm talking to a real alien. It was a bit unnerving, but it was quite cool. I thought it was fantastic. Yeah.
And did it almost feel like an ET moment for you?
It did, yes. It did. And it was it was quite the treat. And I'm the what? I couldn't make up my mind what the hell this was about. But I knew that, you know, the part of me knew that it was a puppet, but it was very, very convincing puppet. It was quite.
And I suppose, Gary, in terms of the props and the sets on Stargate SG, one of those memorable was your sort of battle fighter or sort of ship, the sort of Russian sort of ship, and what was that sort of like in terms of stepping inside of that, in terms of the sort of, I know the outside of it, you probably was only shown on air, but actually the inside walking around that.
Oh, yeah, on my ship, you mean? On the Korolev? Oh,
yeah.
Fantastic. It was a huge set. I mean, it was like, as big as the main floor of my house, maybe even bigger.
Okay.
We had like 15, 20 people in there, and and everything worked, and my chair was fabulous. I felt like, Captain Kirk in my Star Trek chair, and it was all the screens, everything was practical and working, and it's for all intents and purposes, you're in the ship. The only thing we didn't see is the aliens shooting at us, on our monitors on screen. We didn't see that. We'd see, a piece of paper going like this, moving across and then firing at us. And so we got that, but because they were all put in later on in the special effects. But that whole Stargate set was something. The big gate and the big huge machine guns aimed at the gate, and the way